There's a sound that only some people can hear. It comes at night, low and constant, and impossible to escape. And years ago, something else reached us too. A signal, clear enough to notice, but never repeated.
Ready for the best summer ever? ID Tech is the original and most trusted tech camp for kids, ages 7 to 17, offering over 50 epic courses like Camp Crunch Labs, IRL, BattleBots with take-home bots, AI and machine learning, and more. Camps are all about high-energy fun, new friends, trusted instructors, and exclusive tech partnerships. Experience ID Tech at 75 college campuses nationwide. Visit idtech.com and use code IDTech to save $150 on a week that's guaranteed to be the highlight of your kid's summer. ID Tech is more than just the original and most trusted tech camp for kids ages 7 to 17. ID Tech is where kids find their people, the engineering and creating people, the fire-breathing, shell-spinning BattleBots people, the just as happy building games as they are playing them people. ID Tech offers over 50 epic courses like Camp Crunch Labs IRL, BattleBots with take-home bots, and more at 75 college campuses across the country. Visit idtech.com and use code IDTech to save $150 on a week that's guaranteed to be the highlight of your kid's summer.
Spring Black Friday is on at the Home Depot. Save on grills and patio sets that will be sure to bring your hosting game up a notch. Fire up your feast with help from the Home Depot and save on grills. Like the Next Grill 4-burner propane gas grill was $249, now on special buy for $199. Or give everyone the best seat in the yard with the Hampton Bay Mayfield Park 4-piece conversation set for only $399. Save on grills and patio sets with low prices guaranteed during Spring Black Friday only at the Home Depot. Now through April 22nd, while supplies last. Exclusions apply. See homedepot.com/price match for details.
Hello, I'm Sarah.
Hello, I'm Toby.
And welcome to the Whispering Woods podcast. This episode is all about
The Bristol Hum.
It is the Bristol Hum and other hums around the world. And the wow signals. We've got a bit of a mixture and I wanted to tie it all together neatly. Whether I accomplish that, you'll have to let me know. But first of all, I hope you're all doing okay out there. Lots going on in the world, as always.
Yeah, stock up on your sources.
Yeah, stock up and everything at the moment.
Yeah.
It's like COVID all over again, but different. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can do so by visiting patreon.com/The Whispering Woods, where we have a number of tiers, and you can listen ad-free for a small monthly fee. We're also on Apple Premium and social media if you'd like to support us that way. And there was something else that we do. Or you can rate and review and follow so you don't miss a thing. All of those things help grow the podcast. Right. We'll get straight into this then. Because we're from Bristol, if you didn't know. So this is really relevant.
Yes, very.
Okay, you'd heard of the Bristol Hum anyway, hadn't you?
Yeah, I hear it sometimes.
Did you?
Yeah, I have heard it before.
Yeah, I've never heard it.
Because I did hear it about it somewhere. They get it in Cork as well, I think.
Oh, okay.
In Ireland.
Right.
But I don't know what it is.
Right, are you ready for the story?
Yes, I am.
In the 1970s, residents across Bristol, UK, began writing to local newspapers with complaints that at first seemed too vague to take seriously. They weren't reporting something visible. There was no incident or single event, nothing that could be photographed or pointed to. Just a sound, low and persistent. difficult to describe in a way that made it feel real to anyone who hadn't experienced it for themselves. The letters arrived gradually at first. A few mentions of a strange noise at night, something distant, something easy to dismiss as traffic or industrial activity. But there was something unusual about the descriptions. People weren't just saying they could hear something. They were describing the same thing. A hum. Not loud enough to dominate a room, not sharp enough to demand attention, but steady, constant, and impossible to fully ignore once it had been noticed. It was often compared to a diesel engine left running somewhere far away, the kind of low mechanical vibration that sits beneath everything else. Except this didn't behave like a distant sound should. It didn't fade when you moved through the house. It didn't change direction. And when people went outside to try and locate it, it wasn't there. As more letters came in, the pattern became harder to dismiss. People from different parts of the city, with no connection to one another, were describing the same thing. They were hearing it at similar times, usually late at night or in the early hours of the morning, when the rest of the city had settled into silence. That detail mattered, because it meant the sound wasn't being masked by anything else. There was nothing competing with it. No traffic or daytime noise. Just stillness and something beneath it. For many, the hum was not immediately alarming. At first it was something you noticed and then tried to ignore. Something you assumed would pass, or that you would eventually stop hearing if you didn't focus on it too much. But it didn't pass. It returned, night after night, and once it became familiar, it became harder to ignore. People began to describe it in more specific ways, not just as a sound, but as something that seemed to settle into the environment itself. Some said it felt like it was coming through the floor, a faint vibration that could be sensed more than heard, especially when lying still. Others described it as being inside the walls, as though the structure of the house itself was carrying the sound. Then there were even accounts of it feeling internal, not in the ears, deeper than that, as though the body was responding to something just beyond normal perception. Sleep was one of the first things to be affected, not because the hum was loud, but because it was constant and unchanging. The steady presence that didn't rise or fall in the way natural sounds do. It didn't follow the rhythm of traffic or wind or distant movement. It existed, continuous and uninterrupted, sitting beneath everything else. And that made it difficult to ignore, because the human mind is built to filter out background noise, but only when that noise follows patterns it understands. When something remains constant, without variation, it becomes harder to push aside. It stays. For some residents, the experience became frustrating. For others, it became something more, a source of anxiety, a growing sense that something wasn't right, even if they couldn't explain why. Because when you can't locate the source of something, you can't move away from it. Investigations were eventually carried out. In 1980, after repeated complaints, Bristol City Council conducted noise tests in an attempt to identify any environmental source that could explain what residents were hearing. Equipment was brought in, readings were taken, and surrounding areas were monitored. But the results were inconclusive. No single source could be identified. No consistent low-frequency signal was detected at levels that would explain the reports. But the reports continued. Over the years, the hum would fade from public attention, only to return again later. It was never constant across the entire city, never something that everyone experienced at once, but it lingered in the background, carried forward through individual accounts, passed between those who had heard it and those who hadn't. And each time it resurfaced, the descriptions remained the same. In 2015 and 2016, the hum returned to wider attention. Residents once again began reporting a low, droning sound, often at night, often impossible to locate. This time, the reports spread quickly, shared across social media, picked up by local news. People described lying awake, listening to something they could not switch off. One woman explained that she'd been hearing it for years, a low, rumbly presence that seemed to appear almost every night, just as the world settled into silence. Another described it as a kind of electrical buzz, something that filled the room without ever revealing its source. A man from Downend said he heard it most nights, sometimes up to 80% of the time, and that it had begun to affect his sleep. "It's the not knowing," he said. "That's what drives you mental. Because without a source, there is nothing to point at, nothing to fix, nothing to prove that what you are hearing is real in the way other sounds are real." And perhaps the most unsettling detail of all is that even now, in the same houses, on the same streets, there are people who hear it clearly and people who hear nothing at all. What was happening in Bristol was not isolated. Reports of the same kind of sound began to emerge in other parts of the world, often separated by thousands of miles, different climates, different environments, and yet described in ways that felt uncomfortably familiar. Not identical, but close enough to raise questions. In the early 1990s, residents of Taos began to report something they struggled to explain. It wasn't sudden. Like Bristol, it appeared gradually, through individual accounts that only later began to form a pattern. People described a low-frequency hum, something that seemed to sit just at the edge of hearing, often strongest indoors, often most noticeable at night. At first it was dismissed. Taos is a place known for its stillness. It's quiet, its wide open landscapes where sound carries differently. And the assumption was that what people were hearing could be explained by distant traffic, or environmental conditions, or something simple that hadn't yet been identified. But the reports continued, and they became more consistent. People described the same qualities seen in Bristol: a sound that didn't behave normally, a vibration more than a tone, something that could not easily be located, and did not change as you moved toward or away from it. Some said it felt like a pressure in the ears. Others described it as something internal, as though the sound was being generated within the body rather than received from the outside world. Eventually, the reports gained enough attention to prompt formal investigation. Researchers carried out surveys, attempting to establish how many people were actually hearing the sound and what exactly they were experiencing. The results were striking. Only a small percentage of the population, around 2%, reported hearing the hum at all. And even among those who could hear it, the descriptions were not perfectly aligned. Some reported a deeper tone, others a slightly higher vibration, as though each person was experiencing a variation of the same phenomenon, rather than a single fixed sound. Sensitive equipment was brought in, homes were monitored, acoustic measurements were taken over extended periods, but the outcome remained the same. No single source could be identified. No consistent signal was detected at levels that would explain the experience. And so the tower's hum remained, not dismissed, not explained, simply there. Nearly 2 decades later, in 2011, residents of Windsor, Ontario, began reporting something that, on the surface, seemed similar. A low-frequency hum. A deep vibration that could sometimes be felt through walls and floors. But this case developed differently. In Windsor, the number of people reporting the sound was much higher. Thousands of residents came forward, describing a persistent droning noise that in some cases was strong enough to cause physical sensations. Windows rattling, floors vibrating, a pressure that could be felt as much as heard. Unlike in Taos, where the experience seemed confined to a small percentage of the population, the Windsor hum appeared to affect a much broader group. And because of that, it was taken seriously more quickly. Investigations were launched. Teams from the University of Windsor and the University of Western Ontario conducted detailed studies using specialised equipment to measure low-frequency sound across the area. At first, the results were unclear. The hum could be detected at times, but not always consistently. Its source was not immediately obvious. Over time, a pattern began to emerge. The sound appeared to be coming from across the river, from an industrial site on Zug Island in neighbouring Detroit, specifically from a steel plant. Blast furnaces, large-scale industrial machinery, and processes capable of generating low-frequency vibrations that could travel over significant distances under the right conditions. And when those operations were reduced, the hum diminished. Eventually, when the plant stopped operations in 2020, the hum stopped. For many, this was confirmation, proof that the phenomenon, at least in this case, had a physical, measurable cause. Something external, something real. Even here, the pattern was not perfect. Because not everyone had heard it, even in Windsor, even at its peak, there were still people who reported silence. In the late 1990s, residents of Kokomo, Indiana, began reporting a similar phenomenon. At first, it followed the now familiar pattern, a low, persistent hum, most noticeable at night, difficult to locate. In Kokomo, the reports quickly began to include something else. Physical symptoms. People described headaches that seemed to build over time, nausea, a sense of pressure in the chest or head that didn't match any obvious cause. The sound itself was not always loud, but it was constant, and for some, that persistence seemed to have a physical effect. Investigations were carried out. Acoustic experts were brought in, and this time, specific sources were identified. A cooling tower at a Chrysler plant was found to be producing a tone around 36 Hz. A compressor at another industrial facility was generating a separate, lower frequency vibration. Together, these created a layered low-frequency environment that matched what many residents were describing. Repairs were made, equipment was adjusted, measures were taken to reduce the noise, and for some residents, the hum faded, but not for all. Even after the identified sources were addressed, some people continued to report hearing something, not necessarily identical to what had been measured before, but close enough to suggest that the explanation had not fully resolved the experience. In the mid-2000s, reports began to surface in Auckland, New Zealand. As with other cases, the descriptions were familiar. A low-frequency hum, often heard indoors, more noticeable at night. A researcher from Massey University recorded a persistent tone at around 56 Hz, a frequency that aligned with what residents described. But beyond that, the investigation did not progress. No official conclusion was reached. No single source was confirmed. In the late 1980s, residents of Largs reported a similar experience, a low, droning sound, most noticeable at night, often described as something that seemed to settle into the environment rather than pass through it. In this case, speculation quickly turned toward a nearby naval base. Some believed the sound could be linked to military activity, specifically low-frequency communication systems used to transmit signals over long distances. Aircraft operating at night, signals moving through the air, but no official confirmation was ever given. No direct link was established, and the hum remained unexplained. Across all of these cases, certain details repeat. Not perfectly, not identically, but consistently enough to stand out. A low-frequency hum, often described as a vibration rather than a sound, most noticeable in quiet environments, strongest at night, difficult, if not impossible to locate, and always heard by only a fraction of people. That detail never changes, no matter the location, no matter the explanation. Most people hear nothing at all. As the reports spread from place to place, from Bristol to Taos and beyond, there was always an attempt to bring the phenomenon back into something familiar, something that could be pointed to and eventually explained. And in some cases, those explanations seemed to hold, at least for a time. In cities like Windsor and Kokomo, investigators were able to identify industrial sources that produced low-frequency sounds. They did not move cleanly through open space. Instead, they bent. They travelled along layers of air, sometimes becoming more noticeable at night when the temperature dropped and the atmosphere settled, allowing low-frequency sound to carry across distances that would normally absorb it. And for some cases, that explanation felt enough, but not for all of them, because in many of the places where the hum has been reported, there is no machinery operating at the right frequency, no industrial activity that aligns with when the sound begins or ends, and no measurable signal that matches what people describe when they hear it. Equipment has been used, sensitive instruments, capable of detecting vibrations far below the threshold of normal hearing, placed in homes, in streets, in the exact locations where people claim to hear the hum most clearly. And again, the result is the same. Nothing consistent. Nothing that fully accounts for the experience. Some have suggested that the source may not be local at all, that it may come from something much larger, from the movement of the ocean itself, where waves striking the continental shelf create a constant low-frequency vibration that travels through the earth. A kind of background resonance, always present and always moving, but usually too faint to notice. Under certain conditions, it's thought this vibration might become more noticeable, rising just enough into perception to be felt, if not clearly heard. But that raises its own questions. Because if the source were constant, then the experience should be constant too. And it isn't. It appears, disappears, returns, often without any clear change in the environment to explain why. There are also suggestions that the hum may be linked to the atmosphere, or to signals moving through the air that are never meant to be heard at all. Low-frequency transmissions, used for communication across long distances, capable of passing through buildings, through the ground, even through the body itself. These signals exist. They move constantly unnoticed, forming part of the invisible structure of the modern world. But there is no clear evidence that they are responsible for the hum. Only the possibility that something already present might, under certain conditions, become perceptible. And then there are the explanations that turn inward, that suggest the hum is not something external at all, but something generated within the body, a form of low-frequency tinnitus or an increased sensitivity to sound, where certain people become aware of frequencies that others filter out without noticing. There is some support for this. Doctors have noted that a small percentage of the population is more sensitive to low-frequency sound, and that the brain is capable of amplifying certain signals when attention is drawn to them, especially in quiet environments. Even this does not fully account for what people describe, because those who hear the hum are not describing something vague or imagined. They are describing something consistent, something structured, something that behaves as though it exists independently of them. And perhaps that is where the explanations begin to fall short, not because they are wrong, but because they do not fully match the experience itself. Because for those who hear it, the hum is not just a sound. It does not drift in and out of awareness like background noise. It settles and remains. It fills a space in a way that feels deliberate, even if there is no intention behind it. People describe it as something that presses into the room, something that sits beneath everything else, unchanged, unaffected by movement or distance. It does not grow louder as you approach it. It does not fade as you move away. It simply stays. And when something behaves that way, it becomes difficult to place and difficult to define. Because most sounds belong to the world around us. They follow rules. They move through space. They can be traced back to something physical. But this does not always follow those rules. And that leaves a quieter possibility. Not one that replaces the others, but one that sits alongside them. That perhaps the hum is not a single phenomenon at all. Not one source, not one explanation, but something that appears differently in different places, and is only noticed by those who, for whatever reason, are able to hear it. There is another detail that sits alongside all of this, not as an explanation, not as a solution, but as something that exists within the same world. Because the world is not silent, even when it feels like it is. At any given moment, there are signals moving through the air, through the ground, through the space above us. Frequencies passing constantly unnoticed, forming a background that most of us will never experience directly. Not because they are rare, but because they sit just outside the range of what we are able to perceive. We move through them every day, completely unaware. In 1977, something unusual was detected. A radio telescope at Ohio State University picked up a sudden burst of energy, a signal that stood out immediately from the background noise of space. It was strong, far stronger than anything typically recorded at that frequency, and it carried a pattern that made it difficult to dismiss as random interference. The astronomer reviewing the data circled the sequence and wrote a single word beside it. Wow. The signal became known as the wow signal. It lasted for 72 seconds, long enough to be recorded, long enough to confirm that it was real, and then it was gone. No confirmed source was ever found. No second detection, no repetition, just a signal that appeared once, and then disappeared back into the background. Since then, other signals have been recorded, short bursts of energy from deep space, now known as fast radio bursts, arriving without warning, sometimes repeating, sometimes not. Their origins still not fully understood. They are not audible in the way we experience sound, but they exist as frequencies, patterns moving across vast distances, reaching us without context. They are detected, measured, catalogued, but not fully understood. And they are the only signals we can detect, because beyond those, there are others, lower, quieter, frequencies that sit beneath the threshold of normal hearing, moving constantly through the environment, through the structures we build, through the ground beneath us, through the air itself. Most of the time they pass unnoticed, filtered out and ignored, but not always, because there are moments when something shifts, when the conditions are right, when the environment settles, when the noise of the world falls away just enough for something beneath it to become apparent. Not louder, not clearer, just present. And when that happens, the experience is often described in the same way: a low, steady vibration, something that does not move, something that does not change, something that feels less like a sound arriving from outside, and more like something that's always been there.
ID Tech is more than just the original and most trusted tech camp for kids ages 7 to 17. ID Tech is where kids find their people, the engineering and creating people, the fire-breathing, shell-spinning BattleBots people, the just as happy building games as they are playing them people. ID Tech offers over 50 epic courses, like Camp Crunch Labs IRL, BattleBots with Take-Home Bots, and more at 75 college campuses across the country. Visit idtech.com and use code IDTech to save $150 on a week that's guaranteed to be the highlight of your kid's summer.
This podcast is sponsored by IQ Bar. I've got good news and bad news. Here's the bad news. Most protein bars are packed with sugar and unpronounceable ingredients. The good news? There's a better option. I'm Will, and I created IQ Bar plant protein bars to empower doers like you with clean, delicious, low-sugar brain and body fuel. IQ Bars are packed with 12 grams of protein, brain nutrients like magnesium and lion's mane, and zero weird stuff. And right now, you can get 20% off all IQ Bar products, plus free shipping. Try our delicious IQ Bar sampler pack with 7 plant protein bars, 4 hydration mixes, and 4 enhanced coffee sticks. Clean ingredients, amazing taste, and you'll love how you feel. Refuel smarter, hydrate harder, caffeinate larger with IQ Bar.
Go to eatiqbar.com and enter code BAR20 to get 20% off all IQ Bar products plus free shipping. Again, go to eatiqbar.com and enter code BAR20.
Wow, that's all I can say.
Yeah.
Did you like that?
Wow.
I love the way they called it the wow signal because of that. I think it's great.
Yeah.
And one thing I didn't know, that the Bristol home dated back so far to like the 70s. That's when I was a little one. I had no idea about that. And of course, we didn't have the internet and we couldn't speak about it with each other and say, are you hearing this? Not that I would have, because I was only little. But it's really interesting, and that the council got involved, because I used to work for the council most of my adult life before I had to quit. So yeah, I just thought it was a great story. Spooky. I thought it tied in really well with the wow signal, just because where are these noises coming from? Are they coming from space? We don't know.
Yeah. I reckon there's an inner over.
In the earth itself, yeah. In the core.
Yeah.
Straight from hell.
Yeah. Yes. Probably is. Well, that's the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll catch up with you again soon.
We will indeed. I will catch you on Thursday for the Reddit and listener episode, and then again on Sunday for the After Dark. Take care, everyone.
Goodbye.
At Uber, every single driver is required to pass a thorough background check before they can start driving. That means any prospective driver goes through a multi-step screening process, checking for any impaired driving or criminal offenses. But the checks don't stop there. Every year, every Uber driver is background checked again, so the person picking you up today meets the same standards as the day they started.
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, good. Thanks.
Annual driver screenings from Uber. One more way Uber is putting safety at every turn. Learn more at uber.com/safety.
The stories told on the Whispering Woods are inspired by historical records, witness reports, and local folklore. While every effort is made to research and represent events accurately, some details, names, and locations may differ from official accounts or have been changed out of respect for those involved. These episodes are created for storytelling and entertainment purposes and should not be considered definitive fact or investigative journalism.